if for people watching the video, they probably didn't hear the question, but part of the question, if I am reiterating correctly, is how can someone in the audience who likes this kind of media help spread the word? And the audience member suggested one way might be by subscribing to these services that he's using right now as we speak, online to find interesting programming. This is the question that we're all dealing with, and that's what this is partly about tonight, is what are we going to do? In Portland, there's something called KX-Ray Radio, right? A new organization was built there after KPOJ went off the air. They raised, $250,000 in like 2 days on Kickstart, bought a low-power frequency, which is heard in parts of Portland, or most of Portland, right? And put some of these progressive voices back on the air. Now, they have their own progressive voices in Portland. So one thing you can do is start regionally. Find out who's in your region. I've gone nationally. I mean, I'm talking to people in West Virginia and Florida and Washington, D.C., all over the place who are doing this great stuff. And I have a whole list of them, if anybody's interested. But one of the things is that social networking replaces the big millions of dollar corporate ad campaigns. That's one effect or one aspect of crowdsourcing. So your audience can actually help build the audience. That's new. It's never been done before, really. The corporations have always controlled everything. You also have models of, maybe the listeners are on the board or own stocks in or shares in that network. Then they can help promote it. But one thing that people might want to think about is that, because I guess, the reason I said this is because it goes back to we have the tools, but like you said, how do you use them? How do you get people to know what you're doing? Now you can create all this wonderful stuff, so how do you get an audience? All of us talk about that every single day. It's the major number one challenge. And sometimes, you get lucky and you get to write for Huffington Post or something that helps. But in reality, a lot of what's going on is two things. One, people are networking amongst themselves, and these networks are starting to grow. Nicole Sandler's network, Radio or Not, which is what Jacob's show is a part of, is a website, and you can go there and you can find different programs on the sidebar besides the one you're watching, which are related, interesting programs like Talking Left. Some folks, like the producers on these programs, have gone independent, like Jacob, and that's where Talking Left came from. They just said, you know what, we want to do our own show. We produce this other person all the time, let's do our own. So networking on the internet, using social platforms, is one way to grow the audience for the people that you enjoy, and also for the producers themselves have to do that. But we may have to face a shift in our paradigm here, which I've been thinking a lot about lately, which is maybe it's really not that important that millions of people are listening to you. In fact, maybe that's a limitation. Maybe your hands are going to be tied now because somebody's making money. We don't have to worry about that. I'm an independent journalist. I freelance for lots of people, so no one controls me. And when I was with Free Speech Radio News with Pacifica Radio Network, which is hopefully coming back, although it went off the air for lack of money, not for lack of an audience, I was paid by a group called Reporters Against Censorship, So we were independent foundation, okay? There are ways of keeping your independence. The question is, how do you create a model that you can retain your independence but also create some income to keep yourself going and to upgrade your new computer that you need now to keep on the air? So that's where Kickstarter campaigns come in, and a lot of there's subscriptions, a lot of programs. Norman Goldman is doing this, $5 a month. You're a subscriber. Now you're helping keeping him on the air. Bob Kincaid is an amazing commentator out of West Virginia, and he's got something called the Head On Radio Network. He's very independent. He actually asks people while they're on the air, would you be willing to donate some money tonight? We need a new transmitter or whatever. We need $150. Is there anybody out there who's willing to do it? And 9 times out of 10, his listeners do it. And there are a few people who told me when I was on his show that they do that quite regularly. They're not necessarily shoveling out money every night, but if he really has a need, his audience keeps him on the air. It does remain this question, though, is it important? Or are we more effective being independent and being a little bit under the radar, which kind of helps sometimes, in order to get this information out to the public, in order to tell the truth? Is it maybe better that we keep these as small networks? Because one of the questions I have in my mind is, what happens when we become the next Fox? You know, I mean, what happens if we build a network and people are throwing money at us like, you know, who knows, BP or something, and then you have to face that crossroads like, uh-oh, well, do we go for the money or do we go for the truth? Well, one good thing about being independent is that you don't have to worry about that because nobody is paying you to not tell the truth, you know? So the paradigm shift may be for some of us that we have to accept that we have to build regional reputations and we have to build national networks doing exactly what everyone is doing, putting a link to somebody else's show on their website and just saying, now we're a network. That's all it takes. You just find some other programming you really like, and you say, would you like to be part of our network? And they say, yeah. Well, what does that take? Well, that means we put a link on our website to your website with a little icon that says, go to filter-free radio, you know? And people are doing that. Now, if you can link those together, those would be like the sub-networks, you know, maybe for now, although they might keep growing. What happens if there's a hub, like possibly the Progressive Radio Northwest website, where you can go and see all these links and you can find all of these people? Well, that in itself is a network now. Nobody's paying to do it necessarily. You don't have advertising or people buying your programming necessarily or controlling what you're saying. What you just have is a hub, like this building, right, where you can go and get this information. But I just wanted to throw that out there, that maybe it's not a good thing to be on MSNBC. I mean, I love Rachel Maddow, but I think there's a middle ground. You don't want to be the starving artist of the media crowd, although a lot of us are. I'm able to continue my work and sustain myself, but I think that we do need to create some kind of economic models, and maybe they'll all be different for each individual program. Maybe somebody will have subscribers, somebody else will do Kickstarter campaigns, somebody else will have commercials for a local green technology business or something. Whatever works for you and your particular community. But maybe the point is not, you know, to become number one and have millions of people watching you. Maybe that's actually not the goal. Maybe it's actually to find a mid-level where enough people know about what you're doing that you can be effective and change things, at least regionally or amongst progressive radio folks or progressive audio folks. And maybe that's what we should all strive for. Instead of, you know, we want to blow up big, maybe we need to stay, not, you know, get the word out, right? But not sell out.
There was another question here which I think might elicit some discussion before we take more questions, and that's how do you go about doing your activities? How do you interact with other content providers? How do you recruit guests? How do you produce your programming? You know, what's it like to actually go through this process today, and especially when there's no corporate or company organization around to take care of all the details?
It's very organic. It's face-to-face. It's phone calls. It's emails. A lot of it has to do with each, as I said before, each individual has a particular platform they like to communicate on. Some of the people that I communicate with will only talk to me on Twitter. Some will only talk to me on Facebook, and some refuse to touch those because they don't even have accounts there. They'll only take emails. Few people will only talk to me on the phone or through text messages. So I have to use all of them, but for me, I have to use them to set up interviews. I have to use them to get in contact with other people who have their own programs. The producers for those programs communicate with me through all of these social networking platforms. Usually we don't talk to each other on the phone until maybe a day before or the day of some interview or something that I do in the media. It's all done behind the scenes online. And part of that is because you can be at a meeting and text somebody, and instead of waiting 2 hours till the meeting's over or you to get back to them, you can literally respond immediately. So I use it also to find, just like the audience uses it, to find these different programs, If I have a story that I'm covering that I don't think is getting any coverage and I really want people to know about it, I'll just start searching for someone, hopefully that someone will let me cover the story. So maybe even people that I've worked for in the past, which often happens, don't want you to write about that anymore or aren't interested in your stories on that particular subject. Go online, use the social networking, check my Twitter account. Who's popping up there that I haven't heard of before? What are they talking about? Go to my Facebook site, see who's posting what. And my friends and my colleagues are sharing this information on these feeds, so I can see when they're posting things if I happen to be on it at the same time. And so I use it for all aspects of what I do. I also use it to distribute what I do. So I use it to set up interviews. I use it to contact media folks. I use it to promote and publish and distribute what I do. And a lot of times in independent media, even if you write for someone, like say I write an article for Truth Out or something, then I feel as an independent and a alternative media type person that I need to help promote that, especially when you're freelancing. Now, if you're a staff writer and you're going to get a salary every week for writing that, for writing your column, that's a different thing. But if you get an article published or you do an interview with somebody that you really admire and you want people to hear this, then you as a journalist have to get on that computer and start telling everyone. Just like you tell each other about new programs or things that you like, I have to do the same thing. So all aspects of it. And the most interesting part of it, though, is the way it's being used to build these networks. Because that's new, and it's just cool to be able to... I think in the past it would have been really, really difficult to to develop some personal interaction with the producer for the Tom Hartman show. But through social networking, you can actually get a hold of them and you can actually interact with them. That's another aspect about this that maybe we didn't talk much about. But social networking, if you're going to stick to a particular platform, is only effective if you are interactive with your audience. If you just post stuff and then run off and never respond to anybody's comments about what you just posted, people won't follow you. And that actually is one of the issues being an independent journalist. That's very difficult because, especially since I was trained to do headline breaking news stuff, because I'm on to the next story. So it's not as effective probably for me as it is if you have a program, which I hope to have soon. But if you've got that content that you're providing on a regular basis with an audience that you're targeting, that's great. I write for all sorts of different people and I go on all sorts of different programs. So by the time something gets posted somewhere, I'm off to the next story, and that's just the way it is. That's why sometimes you have to take a break and get away from it, because there is no 9 to 5 when you're a journalist. You know, there is no vacation. It just depends. Do you want to work today? There's 20 stories that are breaking that no one's covering, so it's up to you. So that's the only problem I have with social networking, is that the interaction. Like if I publish an article, people are going to be commenting on that article, and sometimes I forget to go back and see what people are saying because I've got 2 more that I'm trying to send out right now. So maybe you guys have a comment about what it's like when you actually have a consistent programming like that.
Consistent programming? I have no idea what that is. Good example of this as far as progressive media. If you look at the Occupy movement, okay, I follow a lot of the Occupy movements all across the nation, and there are so many of them, I can't keep up with all of them. I would love to, like the gentleman back there said, I would love to have one Twitter account where I could see all the Occupy movement, but I don't think that's really possible. There's so many of them. So in terms of the progressive media consolidating and staying on focus, I think that's really where social media can come into play. In terms of recruiting guests, there's a woman down in Texas, Julia Trigg Crawford, and she had her land taken away from her for the Keystone XL pipeline, and it was really extraordinary to get that interview. And so to find out and recruit those guests and to get those unique programs is very, very difficult. Going up to Bellingham, talking about some coal trains, down in Portland, talking about the pollution in the water, whatever it takes a lot of time. And then to do shows, that's maybe a couple hours to do a 10-minute show, but you've got to do the research, you've got to do the writing, and it's got to be true content. So again, back to Mark's point, is that interaction really comes into play. And if we had one central hub for progressive networking that everyone could go to and see all these resources, I think that would maximize everyone's benefits. And I think there's people out there like, Ed Schultz, Tom Hartman's obviously a supporter, and these guys, they'd get on board somehow and be supportive of that. If we could just consolidate, perhaps this is a first step with Progressive Radio Northwest to get all of us at one place. And I do think that it is critical to keep that individuality. There's no Voodoo Donuts in Seattle. You have to go to Portland to go to Voodoo Donuts. And we love going to Voodoo Donuts in Portland, Oregon, because it's Voodoo Donuts and it's only in Portland, Oregon. And at Powell's Books, it's only in Portland, Oregon. So you want to keep that individual, focus as far as what you're producing, what you're providing. And I think that individual independence for progressive voices is absolutely essential going forward.
Man, I got hungry for some donuts. I love me some Voodoo. The bacon maple bar is to die for. They put a piece of bacon on a maple bar. It's just genius. How do you go about creating the logistics to make the independent media show exist? It's just like you'd have a conversation with your best friend. Now we have more tools to have those conversations. We can have, rather than a face-to-face where it might be inconvenient, you might be on the other side of town, on the other side of the nation. They came out with a great tool, the telephone, and that connected people. And now we've got, the internet and Twitter and Facebook. It's all just different ways to connect with each other, and it's just establishing those connections. I was almost late to this panel tonight because I was speaking with the security fellow downstairs because we were just talking about how I got lost and I had to go around the block a couple of times, and then we get into the conspiracy on fossil fuel and car efficiency, and come to find out this guy knows his cars. He knows his car fuel efficiency far more than I do, and I had to stop him and say, can I give you my card, come on my radio show, talk to me, and let's have this conversation. And I think for me, anytime that I find something interesting to me, anytime I find something fascinating to me, I try to share it with the kind of the assumption that my listeners, my audience, my friends would also find similar interest, and that comes back to maintaining that uniqueness and being different and maintaining a consistency, I think.
Is that okay? Because we would like to... Is this mic on? Yes, it is. Hi, I'm Don Smith. I've been thinking about progressive media for several years, and I have this website, Washington Liberals. But the point that I've noticed for years is that within the progressive world, there are these two theories of how to do politics. One is bottom-up, where everyone's a journalist, and we don't like top-down organization. We don't like having a boss. We don't like having to follow rules or whatever. We don't care about money. And the other is top-down. And I think we need both. I mean, there's value in both of them. Fox News kicks ass. The Tea Party people kicked ass. They got 60 representatives in Congress. What did Occupy get? Occupy raised consciousness, but they did not vote anyone in office. So anyway, what I think I'd like to see in progressive media is to have, somebody mentioned this, having a website like a portal or one place where everybody goes, and everyone swallows their damn egos and says, we're going to get together, we are progressives, we believe in cooperation, we believe in working for the common good, we're not just in this for ourselves, in our egos to publish and be the big shots, we want to take back the country from the forces of, we want to have politically engaged, we want to be able to communicate with each other and have enough power behind us and a big enough voice that people listen to us. First we talk to each other, and then we want to reach out to the public. Now, I mean, Fox News, people watch it, and the power of a top-down organization is tremendous. It works. We need top-down as well as bottom-up, and we need to, progressives are all about coordinating and the common good and working together, but we don't cooperate as well as the right-wing people do. So I would like to see all the progressive media get together and at least be on the same page, and so they could have a common sort of voice, and then they would have individual voices speaking too, but they would need to be together for that. And by the way, AM 1150 on the AM dial, I forget the name of that radio station, but they're saying, do you want to have your own radio show? Let's have it. And they have like psychic people on there, and they have Dr. Love on there, they have Chinese programming. Does anyone know the name of that radio station? It's AM 1150, and when I don't drive much, but when I do drive, I listen to that. And but they're saying, if you want to have your radio station, please do it. And I bet they could have progressive radio.
That is an interesting point, because that is what I can't remember the call letters either, but it's actually what is considered a pay-to-broadcast station. So for, I don't know, a couple, $200, $300, $400 a month or whatever, you can have your own weekly program, which you could actually produce in your home. By the way, that's what everybody's doing now. If you didn't know, if you see these live streams of, well, Tom Hartman is with Free Speech TV now, but Mike Malloy, Norman Goldman, Jacob Dean, Space Dog. Of course, he's kind of mobile too. He does things all over the place. But Nicole Sandler is broadcasting from her living room. Jeff Santos, who's someone I would highly recommend out of Boston, he's on something called the Revolution Radio Network out of Boston. It's an AM radio station in Boston that's trying to get this stuff national. He's very interested, by the way, in what's going on with this group. We've talked about this group on the air, and he and the progressives in Boston feel a particular affinity to this area, and so they're kind of watching us to see what we're doing. But he broadcasts from his living room. That's an issue we don't really need to talk about. Personally, I'd rather not let them see my dirty dishes, but that's just my style. Jacob pretty much has a studio sort of set up, with lots of logos too. And I would just say, when I say logos, I mean he's got filter-free radio right there below the microphone, and plenty of ways when you see him broadcasting to connect with that program. Some people just, have nothing behind them, and it's just the curtain or the window out to their porch or something. But that is an important point. Sorry that I didn't get back to that immediately. By the way, check out Washington Liberals. It's a very interesting website where people do write some cool stuff, and they've allowed me to write there, so I really appreciate that. I think that's one option for progressive radio, is to pay to play. It's not maybe the best option, but it depends. Like I said, there are many different ways this can be done. But all it would take, literally, would be donations or a sponsor. They underwrite the show. You find a local... That's what these programs that he was talking about do. The Psychic Pet person may actually have a pet store or something that actually advertises or underwrites their show. So they actually pay for the programming. Then you get to do the programming because you have somebody to underwrite you. It's a public radio model, which is actually being used more by commercial people now. I think Jeff Santos, his program is underwritten by a labor union. Now, as an independent journalist, I don't know. There is a question there, who's paying for this broadcast. Ed Schultz just got in big trouble for that kind of thing, if you heard about that. Big contributions from the labor unions. And but that's one way to do it. You find a local business, somebody that advertises. I knew somebody who had a program on there for a little while, and it was that shop in Fremont called Wallingford called I Am Not a Number or something, where they sell a lot of posters and buttons and things. They underwrote the program. For them, it's cheap advertising, because if you had to pay for that same amount of airtime on Cairo or something, it would cost a lot more. So it's actually cost effective for someone to underwrite your show. You get to mention them at the beginning, maybe in the middle, and at the end you say, this program was brought to you today by whoever sponsored that show. So that is a very interesting point. Well, that's the thing, is I was trying to take notes while you're talking, and it is, I do want to respond to this. Okay, there is one Occupy candidate who is a self-proclaimed Occupy candidate who got elected to Seattle City Council. Her name is Shama Sawant, and she stirred up a lot of controversy, and she's getting international attention from media all over the world. And she's also pretty much started this campaign for $15 an hour minimum wage in Seattle. At least she made that her platform when she ran for office, and surprisingly beat the incumbent Richard Conlon. So that's just a minor point there, but it really is true that the Occupy movement generally did not trust the political system. between the Electoral College and the Citizens United decision, people just said, you know what, if we go into this, we're going to get our hands dirty and we're not going to be able to stick to our principles. Now, that can work or not work. That also happened in Spain during the Civil War, where the anarchists actually fought the fascists, I believe in Madrid, and won. When they were offered parliamentary seats, they refused. When they were offered a share in power in the government, they refused. They said, we're anarchists, we don't believe in government. Well, the next thing you know, the fascists are taking over. Now, the second time this happened, yeah, they actually said, okay, maybe that wasn't a good idea. We want a few people representing us in parliament. That's an age-old discussion, especially in the Northwest, about whether you want someone to be your boss. I'm thinking that comes in when you have a dedicated news network where it's journalism and you have to keep your ethics and you have to follow the Society for Professional Journalism guidelines. You do need some editors, managers. Independent journalism and independent programming, I think it's... if you say it's a network or you try to build a network, then you're going to have some top-down management unless you are just individuals who connect through this thing called the network, which tends to be what's happening now. Whether all of these people are on the same page now, that's a different question, because sometimes they're not. So people I've reached out to in progressive media haven't necessarily been that interested in reaching out to anyone else. They're into their own thing. You know, Norman Goldman came here because he wants to push this issue all over the country. Other broadcasters have their little niche, and they're not that interested in what other people are doing. They're just trying to keep their show together, or they may just not like the style of other people. That's why I said organic, because Radio or Not came together because all of this programming is similar in their, I don't know what you say, commentary style, their political style. But what you're bringing up is the political element of all of this. Where does progressive media come in? Where does politics come into that? These guys may have more to say about that. I am trained as an independent journalist not to necessarily promote one side or the other. It's very apparent where my sympathies are, and I make that very clear. But I worry sometimes, and I'm not talking about having a program where you're having interviews and opinion and commentary. Now, when I start doing that, it may change. But right now, I can't really address the political side of it. The fact is that Clear Channel owns 880 radio stations around the country. It's clear, I can say this as a journalist, they have a political agenda. They did this for a reason. KPOJ was sold off right after the election. They have a political agenda. Cumulus owns 330 radio stations around the country. If Brad Friedman had a chart, my article at Op-Ed News goes into this, called Is Radio Dead? Brad Friedman had a chart on Bradblog, which showed the red stations versus the blue stations. You couldn't hardly find the blue stations anymore. It's terrible. So just as a journalist, I can say that political imbalance in the media is way off balance, and there needs to be more progressive voices just to even it out.
First of all, Space Dog Radio will never be Fox Network, ever. Secondly, it's an excellent point. I appreciate you bringing it up, and I really do think that, as everyone wants to be independent, there comes a point where you have to be grown up about the business aspects of it too. And there needs to be some top-down management, there needs to be a business model, and there needs to be effectiveness behind that business model within the confines of being independent. So I appreciate all those things, but we'll never be Fox Radio. Sorry.
Well, being from the bottom, I like to focus on bottom up. That's kind of where I come from. Come from a middle class background with not much. But Don, to your point, I think the best thing that Fox News has got going for itself is the fact that it's live 24/7. I would like to see MSNBC live 24/7, especially on the weekend when they're trying to show repeats of whatever that prison thing is. But they've got the money to do it. They've got the huge corporate backers to do it. And I think that the top-down that you see, with Fox and the Republicans, it really works with folks on the right because, I'm not trying to be mean or anything, but I think progressives and liberals have more of a capacity to be able to think for ourselves. And so when we're fed, we kind of stop and analyze and process, and then we decide, rather than, I think, like sheep just kind of get in line, follow the rule, vote for Mitt, whatever. I think, and there's been lots of books written, lots of reports done on like the wiring of the reptilian brain, the Republican brain. I don't know the name of the books or stuff. There's a lot of it out there. I don't think that a top-down approach can work personally. That's my personal opinion. I think there are aspects of a top-down approach that are needed, just like Space Talk just mentioned. You have to have some sort of structure. You have to have some sort of plan. You have to stick to a parameter and be responsible about that. But I think that bottom up is the way to go. I really believe in the grassroots. Tell 5 friends, they'll tell 5 friends, they'll tell 5 friends, and we're going to organize the next nonviolent, successful social movement. I really think that's how it's going to happen.
Anybody have another question? Yeah.
Hello. I'm Lindsay. I have hosted a couple of radio shows and made a couple documentaries, and now I am the founder of a tech startup that is, I like to say, Craigslist for social change. So the goal being, no matter what city you're in, you could find all the documentary screenings, protests, political debates in a city. We are live in Portland and Detroit. I just moved to Seattle a couple weeks ago. So the way it works is it aggregates from other nonprofits or anyone who links to it. So any organization or individual can copy the URL of their calendar, put it on our site, and all their events will always show up, tagged by whatever they work for. So it's a super automated, easy way to create a really comprehensive database of the events and organizations and people that work for social change in your community. Activate Hub. ActivateHub.org. So we're only in Portland and Detroit so far. I am looking for people who want to help run the Seattle site. Help the Seattle site means maybe spend 2 hours a week looking for calendar feeds to import or deleting extraneous things that show up, because so much of it is automated. But I call it a calendar. I call it an info database for social change. Personally, I think it's the future of media. Why? Okay, on every event page, there's comments. So people, when they go to a protest or they go to a political debate, can have conversations there. And it lends itself to some great first-hand reporting options. As a journalist, you already mentioned the difficulties in finding guests, and as a listener of Progressive Radio, you often hear the same guests over and over. How do you find other people that are working on issues? So with a database like this, anyone can use it anonymously, but people can opt to have profiles, and as they RSVP, it kind of tracks, I want to find out who's involved in gay rights in the city. How do I do that? And right now, if you Google climate change in Seattle, good luck finding the organizations or the people or the events or ways to get involved. I also have been doing an Activate Hub Radio Minute in Portland. So we do a weekly, 2-minute, here's some of the great activist-y events that are upcoming. Of course, I would like to expand that once our Seattle site is up and running to any show that wants to carry it here. And of course, I think you've been talking about having a network for progressive radio stations. If this is the place where you're finding all the organizations for progressive change, I think it's a good place to find the radio stations for it too. My story. And I need help in any way.
Have you tried to recruit people that work here?
Yes, everyone's working.
They're all working. They're too busy.
On their own thing, everyone's like the founder of some starving.
I would just say, going back to the point earlier of how do we organize, how do we create, how do we find guests, how do we establish connections and stuff. I'll tell you right now, I'm so inspired by Lizzie's comment, what she's doing, that I know that my interest, I've already wrote down the website and everything, I know that if it's piqued my interest, it might pique one of my listeners' interest on my radio show, and so now I'm going to make it a point to get Lizzie on the program, or at least play, some audio of that. I mean, and that is literally, you just witnessed, that is how that happens. And it's just all of us we're kind of doing our own thing independently, and somehow, some way, the paths cross. And as long as we do something rather than ignoring it or letting it go or just, I shoulda, coulda, woulda. Do it. Just do it.
I agree. I actually think we have an obligation, just because of what I said before about where we are in terms of media in the rest of the world. So yeah, it's up to people in this country to create the media if it's not being created, in an honest, authentic way. And that's one word that keeps coming back over and over, is all these networks that excite me are people who I consider to be authentic. Now, I may not agree with everything they say, but I can tell that they're telling the truth from their point of view, and that nobody is controlling those puppet strings, which I can't say is true of the Rush Limbaughs of the world and stuff. By the way, those right-wing talk shows are losing a lot of their audience right now, so that's the future of radio as well, is that there isn't as many people that want to listen to Sean Hannity or Glenn Beck. They're losing a lot of their audience. Rush Limbaugh got put on a smaller station down in LA, taken off the big Fox station and put on a smaller one. So they're doing that, but they're paying those guys millions of dollars because they have exclusive contracts. So they're going to have to keep paying that money for at least a little while. But I would go back to what Norm said about that, because we didn't address this during that question about the future of progressive radio. There may be a window of opportunity at some point for some of these stations or frequencies to be available to progressive media once the right-wingers totally bankrupt them all, which is what's going on now. I mean, that's something, you see it with the government, you see it with the corporations. It's another 2008 crash ready to happen in the right-wing media. However, on the progressive side, we don't have as much overhead or as much debt to Bain Capital and places like that. So I think that there's actually will be a better survival rate. But we should have mentioned this before, the old saying in radio, if you haven't been fired at least 3 times, you're not really in radio. So we may see more of that. But I'll tell you what, my main takeaway from this, and it has been for a long time, is like you, my world was changed when I discovered people like Mike Malloy, Tom Hartman, Norman Goldman, Nicole Sandler, all these people that used to be on the Air America network or the Nova network in the case of Mike Malloy. And there are many more names that I could mention, and you know who I'm talking about. Randy Rhoads, all these people. You cannot hear them on the radio in most places now. They are considered too controversial, let's face it. I mean, even public radio won't touch them. They will Tom Hartman, but they're not going to put Mike Malloy on a public radio station. And they're not the only ones. Bob Kincaid, head on radio network. We Act in Washington, D.C., Jacob did a show with them. Radio or Not, Nicole Sandler, Jeff Santos out of Boston, Carl Wolfson in Portland, Ed Fallon in Iowa and Des Moines. These are all people that are very independent, authentic people who really deserve an audience, and they deserve us to help get the word out about who they are. So if nothing else, I want those people who actually lend me a hand as well and put me on the air and help me with my work, they deserve a larger voice. And once again, I'm not saying that, they should be, sleeping in a palatial estate every night. I'm just saying that they deserve more than what they're getting right now, that's for sure. Because as far as I'm concerned, they're getting the shaft. And they've worked hard for years and years and years to do what they're doing. And they're in there, they're struggling to survive. But if they don't get support from their audiences and somebody doesn't spread the word, they're in danger, all of them, even though they are making the transition much better, by the way, than a lot of the right-wingers are to live streaming and using these social media networks. They're ahead of the curve in reality when it comes to what radio is turning into. Fox and the rest, they're a little bit behind. It's still really hard for radio people to see themselves on a video. They're very self-conscious, and they don't think of themselves as video. They think of themselves as audio. They also think that the tower that's broadcasting everywhere is the most important thing, and it's not. I keep trying to tell them that, but I know very few of them will listen, except for maybe KEXP here in Seattle, who has listeners all over the world, by the way. Local radio stations, even like our own local Pacifica affiliate, like KBCS or other stations, they don't do much to reach out beyond the region. They consider themselves local, which is fine. But really, the reason that I got really interested in this group to begin with is because all of these people that I've been talking about tonight are doing amazing stuff, and they need support, and we need to do whatever it is. So maybe if the audience has more of a say-so in what's happening on these networks and these programs, maybe they'll be less vulnerable, because it'll be harder for them to sell out because the audience is going to be saying, no, we won't support you. Right now, corporations take you off the air for money, not because you don't have an audience. Mike Malloy this was his number one rated place was Seattle. And Norman Goldman says the same thing. Wherever he goes, number one rating here, number one rating there. But it's not about ratings anymore. It's about stripping the radio stations down to nothing, firing everybody, automating everything, and getting back that money to give to the investors and to Bain Capital.
So if there was a number one status that we have with Malloy, Norman, Goldman, I don't know about you folks, I feel is equally frustrated having this voice, 1090, taken away from us. And the frustration is, what's the alternative now? And Julia, I know you spearheaded a lot of this effort to bring back terrestrial radio. I don't know. Is it going to be in an AM format? That's what's familiar to me. And there's just so many options in terms of distribution and ferreting out, as I said before, who's that voice? Yeah, Nicole Sandler's. Yeah, I do know that. And she's waited with Randy. I'm doing all these calculations in my head for that maybe 2 or 3 hours a day that I'm commuting, listening, this background ambience, and I think it's just a frustration. Where do we turn to for that particular loudspeaker? Where do we turn into? And that's what I'm trying to calculate in my mind. I don't know if that helps.
So are you saying, how do you find this programming?
Yes.
Well, literally, because we don't have the networks that we used to have, you have to go online and literally find their website. That's really the only way that I know of.
Okay.
With Nicole Sandler's website, or that network, radio or not, you can see on the sidebar these other programs. So it does bring it more onto one website. So that's helpful. But literally, if there's a voice that you want to hear on the air, these days, there is no central hub that I know of. You can search for them on TuneIn Radio or iHeartRadio or other live streaming platforms, and so then you could listen to it while they're live.
Okay, I'm going to speak from the standpoint of a listener, all right? I have habits. I get in my car, I take Metro. It's time where my mind wanders. I don't like that. If I can turn on the radio and pick up Stephanie Miller and set the tone of my day with the what you call the Mogs or MOOCs, that's something I look forward to. On my commute back home, I'm turning into Norman Goldman, and I liked his particular format. It becomes a habit, but more than just a habit, it's also something that stirs me. It stimulates me to do action steps, to get involved with more progressive organizations, maybe in the city or involved nationally. So I guess that's what's upsetting to me is it was part of my habit. I would love to have that, be able to make that deliberate decision to, punch into my laptop, pull up, Tom Hartman or half a dozen other folks that have been, mentioned here tonight. But that's what I really miss. And is that lazy? I don't know. I just wish it was back. That's all.
Well, there's no reason that online websites can't do that. There's no reason why. Basically, Radio or Not is like that. If you look at their schedule, you'll know. Or if you look at each program, it'll tell you what time it's going to be on. So you can, I suppose, if you're in your car, like Norman Goldman was saying, you plug into your audio, into the speakers in your car, your audio device, and you enter. Okay, it's 3 o'clock, so 3 o'clock, so Norman Goldman's on. So you type in normangoldman.com, goes to the site, you see the live stream link, and you hit it. Now you've got video if you want to look at it, but when you're driving, you can listen to it. what I do, and it's probably what other folks do, is I literally, I know these programs really well, like you all did. I still know what time they're live. So I just search for them when I know they're live. So I know that Norman Goldman is on 3 to 6. I know that Mike Malloy, this is Pacific time. I know Mike Malloy is still on 6 to 9. I know Carl Wolfson on the X-ray station down in Portland is on at 7 to 9 a.m. So once I get the schedule in my head, then I know who I'm going to listen to at what time. And, maybe sometimes I'll skip and do something else, not that day. But that's what I do. I do the same thing, but it just takes a little bit more back research to find out. You go to their website, you find out what their schedule is. If it says Eastern time, you subtract 3 hours. And it's not as easy necessarily as just turning on a station, but it could be that. I mean, there's no reason why, a website like PRNW or another website could be a place where there would be live streaming 24/7. Free Speech TV does that. You get video all 24/7. There's no reason why a website can't do that. And Free Speech TV is just a website, basically, with live streaming video. That's where you can watch Tom Hartman from noon to 3 every day. So you can see I have my day scheduled out. Carl Wolfson in the morning, and I guess somebody, Jacob was telling about Klugman. Adam Klugman. There's another person we should really plug and that people should listen to. He's on after that. I know that Tom's going to be on at noon. Norman Goldman's going to be on at 3. Mike Moy's going to be on. Now, for me, it's probably easy to memorize these schedules because sometimes I have to go on air with them and stuff. So I know what time I'm supposed to call in or whatever. But now it's in my head, so I can't get it out. I know when they're going to be on. I still probably, you're right though, I still probably don't just go to the computer, hit a button, and listen for the rest of the day like I used to. Seriously though, there's no reason why tonight someone couldn't go home, create a website, and link to their live stream to all of those programs on one website, and then you could just go there and the same thing would happen if those programs would agree to allow you to do that, I suppose, right? But if they would, there's no reason why, anybody could set this up, basically. You just go to the website and you see the schedule, and each one of these programs is streaming at a different time. So what time is it? Well, here's the thing is, how do you link them together? I guess that way you would have to literally have a link to their website to do the live stream, right? Or the other way is that from 3 to 6 is here, from 6 to 9 is there. You just click on it. So the one program ends. The only thing is you have to go back to your computer and click on the next one. Or maybe, no, you could automate it so that it would just automatically go and turn on the next link. So there's no reason. I don't know why this isn't happening, but barring any kind of licensing fees that some programs might want to charge you if they're commercial, I don't see any reason why that can't be done right now. I know what the links are to those websites. In fact, I know what the links are to that particular live stream URL. So I could just paste them in a document, make them a link, and any time of day somebody could go there and hit it and listen to them when they're on the air.
Just real quickly, I think we're about ready to wrap up, right? It's getting closer. But if you go online and just look up progressive radio stations, there's a great one in Chicago, a great one out of Phoenix, and they run the same thing, Ed Schultz, Stephanie Miller, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a really easy way to do it. You just take your smartphone, plug it in your car, and you can listen to it anytime. You don't have to worry about it. The trick is having a smartphone that can do that. We at Space Dog Radio, we pride ourselves on doing independent broadcasts fully remotely. We call ourselves a remote location radio station, which means you can listen to us anywhere, anytime if you've got online access. And that gives you the ability to choose whatever program you want to hear. We're not forcing you to hear anything. We actually did a broadcast on a ferry boat and a video of it going through Orcas Island, where we're playing the radio literally, and there's nothing to it. It's broadcasting right from the car. So it's definitely possible. And I think a really good point here is it's going to take a paradigm shift with listeners to kind of take that extra step. Yes, you have to plug in your smartphone, and yes, you kind of have to know the website. But after that, it's going to be as easy as what you usually do now, is just turning the dial. So once listeners kind of get that change going, then they've got a whole new access to listenership, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would just add really quickly for time. Ask yourself, why did KPTK and KPOJ and Green 960 disappear? It's very simple. Corporate media, mainstream media, commercial radio is not going to air or promote or sustain anything that would work against its own best interest, like progressive radio. And two, most potential advertisers or potential investors, especially corporate donors, Walmart, BP, GE, are not going to endorse something that is often critiquing themselves and powerful public figures and the corporate takeover of democracy. So the reality is terrestrial radio costs a lot of money, millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And, where's that money going to come from? So what is the alternative? You look at nonprofit community-based radio stations that are listener supported. You've got KEXP in Seattle. You've got the news station down in Portland is X-Ray FM, and they just said, hey, we want to do a progressive radio station on the air in Portland. Can you give us some money? They got $100,000. You think $100,000 would be a lot of money to put together a radio station? Their signal is so weak, I'm telling you, that you can only pick it up in like maybe one or two neighborhoods in Portland. You go anywhere farther west than I-5 and 26, or you go farther north than 84, and you've lost the signal. And that's $100,000. So the reality is terrestrial radio is very expensive. And unless we've got a BP or Walmart to back us, which I doubt that's going to happen, we're going to really have to find that alternative.
I want to say one quick thing about the programming. People used to look at the TV guide, right? The only difference now is that instead of 4 or 5 channels, you've got 1,000 million. So it's the same process. You look at the TV guide and you go, do I want to watch this? It's ABC News or CBS News or NBC News. Well, now you just go, do I want to go to ABC News website, CBS News website? But that was an excellent point, and I should have mentioned that. I listen to a lot of these programs actually on other radio stations that still are programming them, that are still doing progressive radio. One of them out of Phoenix, Arizona is KPHX. They stream almost all of these people we've mentioned tonight that have been taken off the air other places. And before I started watching Free Speech TV, where I can actually see Tom Hartman on the air, I used to listen to him on a station out of Colorado. There's also a progressive station in Chicago. So all you have to do, really, is go to their website, hit the live button, and you can listen to it all day long, these same people. The sad part is that there are fewer and fewer of them out there, but you can find them. You don't have to be near the radio station. And I really should have mentioned that because that's really important.
My name's Norm Conrad. 3 points. One thing I heard most of you talk about was transition. And this is where we're moving, where media is going, whatever. Well, I am one who is mostly interested in social change. And that's all useful, but what about the present? Right now we're dealing with, as we all know here, a media environment that is essentially hostile to virtually anything and everything progressives like, want, etc. So the question then becomes, number one, how do we get information to folks who aren't willing to do this paradigm shift of punching buttons, going through this, that, and the other thing, who want to go into their homes, into their cars, and let it wash over them? And right now we have nothing. The second thing is, all of the whether it's the internet or anything else, these are media that essentially require self-selection. I have to know what it is I'm going for. And unfortunately, we have a country, as we all know, that has been, over the last 40 years, systematically idiotized. And getting us to reach for specific things is fine as long as you're already there. Most of us aren't already there. I don't need a medium to speak to the choir. I need a medium to talk to the folks that aren't even in the hall. that don't know what's going on, and frankly, right now, don't even know they care about what's going on.
I wish I had a different answer for you, but today, if you want to listen to that wash of sound of all these progressive voices, the only way you're going to get it is off of your computer or your smartphone by going to KPHX in Phoenix at that website. But once you do that and you press the live streaming button, it's yours all day, 24/7. That's all you have to do. Unfortunately, there isn't. Only Tom Hartman is left in Seattle, and that's on KBCS. And unfortunately, like KXR. No, the Portland station. It's a bigger signal, and I guess they are investing money in a brand new tower, which will make their signal even bigger. But it's still difficult to hear Tom Hartman in downtown Seattle and parts of Seattle because it's being broadcast from Bellevue. That's where KBCS is. And also, what we've been discussing here, this is a whole other issue, but there's public radio versus commercial progressive radio, which is what we have all been talking about. And it is a different ethic, and it's a different group of people. Unfortunately, we're finding that there's competition between the public radio audience and these progressive shows. So when I say Tom Hartman is on KBCS, the rest of their program, you won't hear Norman Goldman, you're not going to hear Mike Malloy, you're not going to hear anyone else. So the only way you can do that in Seattle right now is find a station like KPHX in Phoenix and use your smartphone or your laptop. That's my only answer. I wish I had a better one. I wish you could just tune in. But you have a good point, about wanting to be able to access it easily. Part of it might be that the technology hasn't quite caught up. So maybe in the future you will have this thing in your car. I mean, now they use satellite radio and things, but there will be ways of doing that.
Well, of course, my point is that right now, I don't know how long any of us have available to wait. The ship is hitting the sand. The reef is out there, in my opinion, whether it's climate change or any one of 100 other things. And the question is, in my mind, do we have the luxury of waiting for technology to catch up to people who at this point have spent the last 10, 15 years brainwashed by Hannity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? How do we get how do we get reality into the Fox household? Into the household where if you happen to live, whether it's Moses Lake here in Washington or Walla Walla or any one of 100 other communities east of the mountains, or for that matter somewhere in between Olympia and Vancouver, how do you get those people an option, an ability to not spend 5 hours a day trying to find something, but something they can quickly and easily get to, real information that in fact will change worldviews?
That is also an amazing point. You were right. I applaud you. Because what you're talking about is an issue we hadn't really covered, which is, yes, how do you reach people who could really be affected by this information who have never heard it before? You guys have any comment on it?
I would say, it's a tragedy that the people who most need to hear this message are the people that don't hear it at all, right? That's the problem. And I think this is where that grassroots activism, actually showing up, being in the streets, demonstrating nonviolently, protesting, putting a physical location and a physical actual demonstration into motion so people can see that. Bring it to their doorsteps. I mean, be respectful, be professional, be nonviolent, but show up and get active and get in the streets. I mean, that's my solution.
Unfortunately, this is Seattle. Seattleites don't do that.
No one does.
I mean, and you're probably right. I mean, there are a dozen, 2 dozen, 5 dozen of us activists who have been trying to get people out to do anything. And, progressives have hemmed themselves into so many little, narrow, tiny niches and silos oh, I'm an environmentalist, but I'm only concerned about orcas. I'm an environmentalist, but I only care about panthers in Florida or whatever. I mean, you could take this to any extreme in any particular general field. We have put ourselves into so many different camps, and we never talk to each other.
We need top down. Is what we need.
Well, it's after 9 o'clock.
I think what you're talking about is populism, which is the only answer that I've come up with is, yes, we are progressive, but if we're going to reach out to everyone, then we have to have a populist message. Jim Hightower would be a great example of that, somebody who's just telling the truth. And we've lost the accidental listeners that you would get from terrestrial radio, which is part of why people don't necessarily get introduced to this information, because you have to go to that specific website. The only people that want to broadcast or publish the reports and the reporting that I do are going to be progressive. So there you go. I'm stuck in my own niche, I don't know how to get it to those other people. That's why we all want to spread the word as far and wide as possible. And then the question is, how do you do that and still stay authentic? The corporations could broadcast us everywhere, but will they let us say what we need to say? So we need to find new models that can get around that.
Well, this has been really interesting, and we now have to put the room back together. On your way out, we would appreciate it if you could give us a few bucks to help us cover the cost. We always put these things on for free, but they do cost money, and we do take contributions to help out. So thanks for coming, and good night.